All right, so let's talk about some of the different kinds of relationships that you're in. And this is not going to be a comprehensive list, but I'm just trying to give an example. So, of course, you have friendships, you have coworkers, or you have classmates, you have teammates, you have, parent-child relationship. Either you're the parent and you have children, or you are the child and you have parents, which that never goes away. Maybe you have a romantic partner. I tried to come up with ones that have different kinds of dynamics to them, right? Because you can imagine that while maybe some of your coworkers or classmates you would call friends, there's something different about being friends with somebody who you are seeing every day because you both are like required to be there, as opposed to friendships where you deliberately seek a person out to spend time with or to share your ideas with, stuff like that. You can imagine that teammates kind of have a different dynamic than your parents and their children do, things like that. And so I tried to pick the kinds of relationships that have different kinds of dynamics to them to kind of illustrate these points. So when we talk about different theories of how we maintain our relationships or what we get out of them or whatever, one of them is called social exchange theory. And this is really an economic theory that says, relationships are just economic situations, just like any other economic situation, right? Where basically, we give something to the other member of the relationship and we also get something back from it, right? And that there's some kind of, norms about how you give and how you take in these kind of economic situations, right? Like we all know that in any relationship, you're not supposed to always be the one who benefits and never the one who has to give something up. Like that's not a healthy relationship if you always benefit, or flip it over, you're always the one who's giving, right? That's why agape love is not really a healthy kind of love to have in a romantic relationship, because in a romantic relationship, you're not supposed to give up everything and your partner get everything. Only in a situation where you have like this baby who can't give. Well, you know what, I'd like to argue babies give back. They give you a little smile, or they give you a hug, or they learn to walk. And so even that I don't think is completely selfless. Also, by the way, they represent, you getting your genes in the future and a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm not even sure a baby is a good example of, a situation where one does all the taking and the other one gives all the giving. I'll say the first 6 weeks of a baby's life, they are nothing but take. I will say that's probably pretty good. That's a pretty good example of when it's purely one direction and the other one really doesn't, they hardly open their eyes, let alone, really interact with you. So, okay, maybe that's all give on one side and all take on the other. But I mean, 6 weeks, and then the relationship starts to develop. So, and I think it's part of the norm of a parent that you recognize that there will be this period of time where there's no reciprocation, right? So I'm going to stick with there are norms about the give and the take in a relationship. And then it varies by relationship, right? You have different kinds of expectation when you are the parent than you do when you are the child, or you have different expectations when you're friends than you do when you're coworkers. And right, you have different norms for those different situations. No matter what, all of us are motivated to try and maximize our own rewards while minimizing our own costs, right? So if we could get away with getting more than we really have given, I think most of us would. I think there's some guilt to be had from that sometimes, but I can get over it maybe. I'm thinking personally right now, this has been a long pandemic of, my husband, my son, and I being in the same household, almost exclusively eating at home. And oh my gosh, I live in a modern world. It's not hard to wash the dishes. It involves, like scraping them off, putting them in the dishwasher, and then emptying the dishwasher later. But all of us are like, oh no, emptying the dishwasher again. I don't want to. We're all acting like it's so much to give. And we all sort of are like keeping a tally of who did it last. And this mental tit for tat that we're all doing. And I think that's normal in relationships where we're like, okay, I don't want to be the doormat who's doing everybody's dishes, right? I don't want to be the one who has all the costs and none of the rewards. Like we all want to maximize our rewards while minimizing our costs. Of course, there are equivalent behaviors. Like if I empty the dishwasher today, I expect my husband to do it tomorrow, and my son to do it the next day. Like we expect those kinds of that. But then there's also costs that we would like to minimize in the form of like disagreement in the household, or, hurt feelings, or even we don't want to experience the cost of feeling guilt. So there's a lot of things that we mean by rewards and costs, right? It's not just purely like how much labor I do versus how much, free stuff I get. Like, we're not talking about that necessarily. The basic idea is that these relationships operate under the principle of fair exchange, that we all have just sort of this sense of whether we're starting to be taken advantage of. And that tends to make us dissatisfied in the relationship. We also will feel dissatisfied in a relationship if we feel like we are getting more than we deserve and the other person seems okay with it. Like, because that builds so much guilt in us that the other person is letting us take advantage of them. There are certain communities and stuff who go ahead and sanctify the fact that some people like to serve and other people like to be served. And so they'll have like situations where it's like all laid out and they're all super specific about it and like that. But in most, typical relationships, people are not expressing, oh no, I like to do it, and then really I mean forever, and I always will be the servant. Like, most people don't want to have that kind of relationship. And so it can cause a lot of discord in relationships because people have this principle of fair exchange overriding most things, this sense of equity that, if I'm in a friendship, we should basically be equal. If I'm in a romantic relationship, we should basically be equal. And one of us doesn't get to do all the fun stuff and the other one has to do all the bad stuff. Like, that's not equitable. Some of us, sometimes I get to do the fun stuff and sometimes you get to do the fun stuff. Like, that's equitable. And now with parent-child relationships, not necessarily equitable, are they? In boss-employee relationships, probably not equitable. But in coworker relationships, we might expect some equity. Like, if we're equal, why am I doing more of the tasks that nobody in the company likes to do, and a bunch of you are still benefiting from it? If you're in a group, right, doing group work for class, there's this sense of equity, like we're all supposed to carry our own weight. All right, another aspect of social exchange theory talks about this kind of equity of self-disclosure. And I found this funny Facebook video about Facebook, and it's old enough that it mentions poking, and that's something you haven't been allowed to do on Facebook for, 10 years. So it's kind of funny. And he's giving this sort of interpretation that really is a good example of this social exchange theory, this idea that the disclosure should be equitable. So I'll let you watch this video and we'll come back and talk about it on the other side.